The spruces make up the most ubiquitous group of trees in New Brunswick, growing in our lowest bogs, highest mountains, and everywhere in between. Our three native species all provide unique benefits to their local ecosystems, and a large variety of organisms rely on them for survival. The spruces are one of our most difficult groups of trees to identify, especially when considering our two non-native species. However, with the right info and experience, they too can be quickly identified in the field. White spruce is our most widespread spruce species. In New Brunswick, it predominantly acts as an early to mid-successional species, growing abundantly in abandoned farm fields, old clear-cuts, and young forests, but rarely being found in old-growth forests. In the northern parts of its range in the boreal forest region, it acts as a late successional species, and in some forests and river valleys in the north of New Brunswick, this is apparent in the forest cover. This species often grows 60 to 70 feet tall and 1 to 2 feet wide. However, exceptional specimens can reach 110 feet tall and 3 feet wide. White spruce prefers to grow in deep, moist soils and cannot tolerate excessively wet, rocky, or droughty conditions. They are shade intolerant, however they are less so than black spruce. Common associates include birches, aspens, red maple, balsam fir, and other spruces. White spruce is ecologically important as an early successional species, providing some of the first coniferous cover for animals on recently disturbed sites. White spruce do not have any major pests. However, many animals and insects such as deer, grouse, eastern spruce budworms, and false hemlock loopers feed on the needles. As with our other native spruces, the tender spring needles can be eaten and also be used to make beer and gin. Red spruce is our largest and longest-lived spruce species, commonly reaching 80 to 90 feet tall, 2 feet wide, and 300 years old, with exceptional trees reaching 130 feet tall, 3 feet wide, and 450 years old. Red spruce is a mid to late successional species, generally showing up in established forests and commonly found in old-growth forests. Unlike our other spruces, it is exceptionally shade-tolerant and can survive for decades in the shady understory waiting for an opening. Red spruce requires evenly moist soils, not too wet and not too dry. However, as long as this condition is met, it can tolerate many soil types, including very rocky conditions. This species is common throughout New Brunswick, however is particularly abundant along the Fundy Coast and in the mountainous regions of northern and central New Brunswick. Common associates include sugar maple, yellow birch, American beech, eastern hemlock, and balsam fir. Like the other spruces, red spruce provides cover and an abundance of food to wildlife. A large variety of animals eat the seeds, such as red squirrels, mice, and a variety of birds, such as the white-winged crossbill. The bark is eaten by porcupines in the winter, and many insects, such as the eastern spruce budworm, eat the needles. In spring, the young needles can be eaten and have a more pleasant flavor than other spruces. Until recently, a 450-year-old spruce in Fundy National Park was the oldest tree in the Maritimes, and the oldest known red spruce. Beautiful stands of old-growth red spruce can be seen at Ayers Lake, with the majority of trees standing at 90 to 100 feet tall, and some reaching 120 to 130 feet tall. Black spruce is New Brunswick's smallest spruce species, generally growing less than 50 feet tall and less than 1 foot across, although rare specimens may reach 80 feet tall and 2 feet across. They usually live from 150 to 250 years. However, they may be able to live upwards of 350 years in northern regions. In many habitats, black spruce will be under 6 feet tall due to the difficult conditions. In New Brunswick, this species is limited almost entirely to soils that are excessively wet or thin, as their low shade tolerance prevents them from competing with most other tree species. They are very common in peat bogs and swamps, and on exposed rocky mountaintops and coastal cliffs. However, they are rarely found between these two extremes. Common associates include tamarack, eastern white cedar, yellow birch, and balsam fir on wet sites, and mountain ashes, willows, birches, and balsam fir on exposed rocky sites. Black spruce is an important species of bogs and mountaintops, as it is generally one of, if not the only tree species growing in these locations. Many birds and rodents eat the seeds of black spruce, and the seedlings are a popular food source for snowshoe hares. It is the host for the larvae of the bog elfin butterfly and the parasitic dwarf mistletoe plant, one of the smallest plants in the Maritimes. Like our other native spruces, this species' tender spring needles are edible and can be used to make beer and gin. This next section is dedicated to the identification of our spruces via side-by-side comparisons. All of the characteristics are the typical or average for a given species, so there will always be outliers that may not fit perfectly. For this reason, it is good to use multiple characteristics when identifying spruces. Our first characteristic is the appearance or silhouette of a mature specimen. White spruce have a full canopy with a narrow columnar shape, and the middle branches are the widest on the tree. Red spruce has a full canopy with a pyramidal shape, and the branches often curve upwards. The lowest branches are the widest on red spruce. Black spruce have a dense upper canopy and typically a sparse middle and lower canopy. They are narrow and have a top-heavy appearance. They are usually a small tree or shrub, under 30 feet tall, and usually under 6 feet in open bogs or mountain tops. Norway spruce has a full canopy with a pyramidal shape, and it has very distinctive droopy outer branches. Blue spruce has a very typical canopy that's full and has a standard pyramidal shape. The second characteristic is the typical habitat of the species. White spruce likes deep, moist soils, predominantly on flat ground or gentle slopes. Old farm fields, roadsides, young forests, and transition zones between wetlands and upland areas are typical habitats. They are most often associated with early succession species, such as birches, aspens, red maple, and balsam fir, and they are fairly rare in old-growth forests. Red spruce are found in moist upland forests, are most common on slopes, and are tolerant of rocky conditions as long as their moisture needs are met. They are a mid to late successional species, found in old-growth forests. They are commonly found with late succession hardwoods such as beech, yellow birch, and sugar maple, as well as balsam fir and eastern hemlock. Black spruce is found in extremely wet habitats such as bogs and swamps, and extremely rocky habitats such as mountaintops and coastal cliffs, and almost never in the areas between. They are technically a late successional species on account of the fact that almost no other trees can survive in the same habitats as them. Its most common tree associate is tamarack, and shrub species are common associates as well, such as sheep laurel, Labrador tea, and wild cranberries. Norway spruce is mostly found in landscaping and only occasionally escapes to roadsides and other disturbed areas. Blue spruce is only found in landscaping. Our third characteristic is cones. White spruce have 1.5 to 2 inch long cones that are cylindrical. The cone scales are flexible and have entire or smooth margins. They fall off the tree in their first year. Red spruce has 1 to 1.5 long cones that are widest in the middle. The scales are stiff with entire or slightly notched margins. They fall in their first year. Black spruce has 3/4 to 1 inch long cones that are nearly spherical, with stiff scales and notched margins. Several generations will be present on a tree at one time. Norway spruce cones are 4 to 7 inches long, cylindrical, and have stiff scales with notched margins. Blue spruce cones are 3 to 4 inches long, cylindrical, and have stiff scales with wavy or notched margins. They are also typically quite light in color compared to other spruce cones. Our fourth characteristic is the needles and twigs of the tree. White spruce needles are 1/2 inch to 1 inch long, are bluish-green when in full sun, are stiff and sharp, and have a strong scent, often described as cat urine. The twigs are whitish and hairless. Red spruce needles are 1.5 to 3/4 of an inch long, green to yellowish-green, flexible, and are not very pointy. They have a pleasant, citrusy scent. The twigs are reddish-brown and fuzzy. Black spruce needles are 1/4 to 1.5 inch long, are bluish-green on more nutrient-rich sites and more yellowish-green on nutrient-poor sites. They are stiff but not very pointy, and the scent is often described as medicinal or menthol-like. The twigs are reddish-brown and fuzzy. Norway spruce has 1.5 to 1 inch long, dark green, stiff and pointy needles. The twigs are reddish and are sparsely fuzzy. Blue spruce has 1/2 inch to 1.25 inch long, strongly blue needles that are very stiff and pointy. The twigs are whitish, hairless, and are much thicker than other spruces. Our final characteristic is bark. White spruce has light gray bark with small, rounded flakes. Red spruce has brownish gray bark with rough, lengthwise ridges that run up the trunk. Black spruce has gray to brownish gray bark with irregular, typically vertically oriented flakes. Norway spruce bark is gray and reddish brown and is relatively smooth with small, irregular flakes and cracks. Blue spruce bark is gray and reddish brown with thick, irregular plates. From the tallest mountains to our deepest valleys, across vast bogs and windswept headlands, the spruces will always grow. If you are looking for an identification challenge and want to learn about some of New Brunswick's most important trees, get out to the woods. No matter where you go, the spruces are waiting for you.